Now, Trump's one big beautiful bill just recently passed through the House of Representatives with a narrow vote of 215 to 214 without a single Democratic vote. Yes, no Democrats voted in favor of this bill. And since the majority of the House and Senate are Republicans, Trump really doesn't need any Democratic votes for it to pass. And we're about to go over just what's in this bill, specifically as it pertains to housing and other specific programs, what the passing of this bill means, and as of now, what's next. So without wasting any time, let's jump right into it. So first off, Trump's one big beautiful bill is a proposed budget reconciliation bill which mainly focuses on tax cuts and government spending. It's important to know that this is not an annual budget bill, and a lot of people think it is, but it's not. So all the government departments and programs aren't going to be addressed in this bill. Even though this bill is about 1,100 pages, it doesn't address everything. Instead, it focuses on specific areas. Now, something that's important to know is that Republicans strategically chose to go with the reconciliation process for this bill, because with reconciliation, it's only required to have a majority vote in the Senate instead of the otherwise required 3/5 vote. So now all they need is 51 votes instead of 60 votes. And guess how many Republicans are in the Senate? 53. So the chances of this bill passing through without any Democratic support from the Senate is likely. Now, the bill itself pretty much extends the major provisions of Trump's 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, as they were set to expire at the end of the year. Now, as far as the tax cuts, it's no secret. The vast majority of the cuts from this bill are going to be for the highest income earners. Shocker. I mean, look, Trump's a high income earner. His friends are high income earners. Friends look out for friends. The rich gets richer. This comes as no surprise. Now, as far as the low income earners of this country, unfortunately, they're not as lucky. Starting with the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP, or better yet, food stamps. SNAP is the nation's largest nutrition aid program, assisting more than 40 million Americans with groceries each month. The proposed bill is seeking to reduce federal spending on SNAP by $267 billion over a 10-year span by implementing a number of changes. The first change, work requirements. In order to be eligible to receive food stamp benefits, you'd be required to work, unless you have a child under 7 years old, or if you're at least 54 years of age. So if you're under 54 or your child is at least 7, you gotta work to keep your benefits. Number 2, state governments won't be able to exempt individuals from the work requirements, and future federal administrations won't be able to adjust exemption criteria or benefit levels. So they don't want anybody messing with the rules and requirements that they set in place. And number 3, the bill is requiring states to take a greater share of SNAP benefits and administrative costs. As of now, SNAP is fully funded by the federal government, and the admin costs are split down the middle between the federal and the state governments. So the bill would require states to be responsible for the bulk of these costs. And experts believe that many states aren't in a position to absorb these additional costs. But Trump responded by saying, the cut is going to give everybody much more food because prices are coming way down, groceries are down. Yeah, okay. Next up, the bill addresses Medicaid. Medicaid is a program that provides government-sponsored health care for low-income Americans. The bill would impose work requirements for able-bodied adults without dependents or disabilities between the ages of 19 and 64. So if you'd want to keep your Medicaid benefits, you'd have to work. It would also require more frequent eligibility checks, making sure that you still meet the requirements to be eligible for benefits. And lastly, the bill would cut federal funds to states that use Medicaid to provide healthcare coverage to undocumented immigrants. We all know how Trump feels about immigrants.
Throw them out!
Now, critics have argued that these Medicaid changes can strip more than 14 million Americans of health insurance, but Republicans are saying that that's a blatant lie. Another popular highlight from this bill, no taxes on overtime. Now, this is something that's pretty appealing as well, but here are the rules. It would only be from 2025 to 2028, which is right around the time Trump is scheduled to leave office. You must make less than $150,000 a year, but I'm not sure if that means $150 before overtime or $150 after overtime. It doesn't really specify. And it looks like initially you may still get taxed on it, but when you file your taxes, you'll receive a tax deduction in the amount of overtime you received. So if I made $100,000 one year and $10,000 was from overtime, then that $10,000 would be subtracted from my taxable income of $100,000. So technically, for tax purposes, I only made $90,000, paying no taxes on that $10,000 of overtime pay. Now, like I said, the idea is appealing, but I can see it being a headache for the IRS and overall worsen the country's debt problem. Another popular highlight from this bill, no tax on tips. This is one of the more popular highlights of the entire bill. Now, it only applies to industries where tipping is customary, like a waiter or a bartender or an Uber driver. And you'd have to make less than $150,000 a year, which I don't think is a problem. And only the first $25,000 in tips is tax-free. But let's be honest, most people who receive cash tips are not reporting it to the IRS. So that money is already tax-free. Now, if you receive tips from customers who pay by credit card, you'll definitely benefit from this rule because the IRS counts tips from credit cards and debit cards as cash tips. So that money would be reported, but you wouldn't have to pay taxes on it for the first $25,000. Now let's talk about housing. So when it comes to rental assistance programs like Section 8, they're not mentioned in this bill. I went through just about all 1,100 pages and it wasn't mentioned anywhere. In fact, I did a search on the phrases Section 8, Housing Choice Voucher, rental assistance, even HUD, and they were nowhere to be found. And again, this is not an annual budget bill, so all government departments and programs aren't going to be addressed. But we already got word on Trump's agenda on rental assistance programs like Section 8. I did a video on it, so y'all can check it out if you haven't already. But even though the bill doesn't directly mention defunding HUD, there's been reports that it'll strip the funding tools local housing agencies need to issue or renew vouchers, therefore putting Section 8 and other housing aid programs on the chopping block. Again, I looked through the bill, it's 1,100 pages. I possibly could have missed something, but I didn't see anything related to rental assistance programs. As far as housing, the bill does address affordable housing, but mainly from a development or an investor perspective. It touches on the low-income housing tax credit, which is a tax incentive for developers and investors, and designed to encourage the development and preservation of affordable rental housing for low and moderate income families. So it modifies the tax credit allocations from 9% to 12.5%, and also lowers the private activity bond threshold from 50% to 25% for certain deals. Again, this is more so for developers and investors, giving them better tax benefits. The bill also expanded the Opportunity Zone programs, which is, again, for developers and investors. So the Opportunity Zone program provides tax incentives for investment in designated distressed low-income areas. Investments made by individuals through special funds in these particular zones will be allowed to defer or eliminate federal taxes on capital gains. So this bill expands those zones, hopefully encouraging more developing and investing in those areas. This bill also expands difficult development areas, known as DDAs, and these are areas with high development costs relative to the area's median gross income. And if developers develop affordable housing properties in these areas, they'll receive a 30% increase in the basis, which will boost the tax credit that they receive. So the bill would expand DDAs to include all Indian areas and all rural areas. So developers would have more opportunities and more of an incentive to develop affordable housing in these areas. So lastly, as it pertains to housing, this bill reinstates the 100% bonus depreciation for certain property, which allows businesses to immediately deduct the full cost of eligible assets in the year that they're placed in service. So for instance, normally, if I were to replace all of the appliances at one of my rental properties for $5,000, since appliances are considered improvements to the property and not repairs, I wouldn't be able to deduct the entire $5,000 as a business expense. Since the IRS says that appliances have a lifespan of 5 years, I would have to depreciate the $5,000 over a 5-year time frame. So each year I would deduct $1,000 from my taxable income. But this bill would allow me to deduct the entire $5,000 all at one time, the very first year. So that's another benefit for investors. So those are a couple of the highlights of this bill. And trust me, there are plenty more, as it's about 1,100 pages long, but I'm not about to report on every single thing. I'll put a link to the bill in the description if you'd like to read through it. But like I mentioned, the bill has passed through the House, and what's next is that it's headed to the Senate, and they'll decide what changes to the bill needs to be made, in which it'll be sent back to the House for approval. So this bill is no way in its final state, but Congress does plan on having a final bill on Trump's desk for a signature by the 4th of July. So they still have some time to go through the bill in its entirety to make changes. And when the final bill is passed, I'll be here to break down the key highlights. So make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. Like always, thanks for watching.